mahalo for joining us. This is our part 2 of our soil workshop. This is the second part of our series. This is brought to you by University of Hawai'i Hilo and the Marine Environmental Research Institute of the Pacific and Hawaii Farmers Union United. The funding for this free workshop series has been provided by the USDA Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Program and the Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers Program. My name is Darlene Kaya-Madaris. I'll be your moderator for the series. I am the Hawaii Farmers Union United Executive Assistant. I provide assistance to all of our union members, as well as connect and communicate with all of our membership. Hawaii Farmers Union United, if you're not kind of aware of them, we represent family farms in 16 regional chapters across 6 Hawaiian islands. HFUU supports Hawaii farmers through legislation, lobbying, and educational research and outreach. Cooperation and networking occur through regional farmers markets, food hubs, and regular events. And we also hold these for each chapter that's across all of our islands. Farmers are able to reach out, learn from each other, connect, network, grow. So for less than $1 a week, you can support our family farms in Hawaii, all while getting your membership back many times over. We've got a lot of membership discounts that we offer across the different islands. And then as well as we are a subsidiary of the National Farmers Union, so they also offer a lot of discounts as well. So you can check out our website at hfuu.org and learn more about our legislation efforts. We also do have a farm apprentice mentorship program. If you folks are looking to take your education a little bit further, that is a great program to look into. We are starting to look into our next cohort, and they learn a lot about what it takes to be a beginning farmer. And if you're interested already, which most of you probably are since you're here on this call, it's a great way to get more in-depth education and hands-on education. So we appreciate you joining us tonight. If you'd like to receive more info on the future workshops, please introduce yourself in the chat and include your information and where you're from, what you do, the type of farming. If you're not comfortable with sharing that with everyone, you can share it with myself or Maria Haas, Dr. Maria Haas from UH Hilo. You can also share that information at the end. We've got a poll at the end of our presentation that we're just asking everyone to share their information so that we can collect some information so we can provide these types of workshops in the future. So now I'm just going to introduce Payton Carling. He was our presenter from our first workshop. He is a UH Hilo Extension professor, and he has been sharing some amazing information about soils, but he will also be helping to introduce our extra special guest presenter from the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please just put them in the chat and we'll have time to go over questions after the presentation. So go ahead, Payton, I'll hand it off to you.
Mahalo, darling. And aloha all. Welcome to the part 2 of the introduction to soil. I'd like to introduce to you Amy Koch of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Amy is Assistant Director of Soil Science with the Natural Resources Conservation Service and has been working in the area of the Pacific Islands region for the last 20 years. And thank you, Amy, for being here. And yeah, go.
All right. Thank you, Payton. Let me get my screen set up real quick. Yeah, thanks for that great introduction. I am super excited to be here. Let's see, are you guys seeing my screen and my presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Yes. So I'm Amy Koch. I am the Assistant Director for Soil Science for the NRCS Pacific Islands area, and we'll talk a little bit about what that encompasses. But hopefully many of you are maybe already familiar with NRCS. We're dedicated to natural resources conservation, hence our name, which really built on our roots as the Soil Conservation Service. So our agency was established during the height of the Dust Bowl, when there was this, legend has it, this dust cloud came into Washington, D.C. just as they were kind of debating this bill. And so that really started things off in kind of thinking differently about how we treat our soil and how we treat our agronomic service or our agronomic resources. And so then that way we can protect them so that really it's for our own good, so that we have food to eat and clean air and water. So we're improving and protecting soil health nationwide. And one of the ways we're doing that is by a focus on what we call soil health. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. What is a healthy soil? And here you see we have superhero. Her name is Mighty Mini Microbe. They have little coloring books that we can order and we give out at events. But she's just kind of a fun little addition that we have of kind of helping people have fun when they think about soil. So our vision is resilient islands with clean and abundant water, healthy soils, and thriving agricultural communities. And that goes across the entire Pacific Islands area that we cover. So we cover, and the green stars here on the map show the locations of all of our offices. So we have offices on all the main islands of Hawaii. So 3 offices on Big Island or Hawaii Island, and then Maui, Molokai, Oahu, Kauai. We also cover American Samoa, and then also the territory of Guam, the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands with an office in Saipan. And then we also have a presence in the freely associated states of Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. So quite a big stretch of teeny tiny islands, but back to our mission, this idea of resilient islands. Now more than ever, we're seeing the need to protect these natural resources and to build more resilient islands as we kind of start to experience some different shifts in climate, perhaps more drought, more rain than we're used to. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how that relates directly to soil and soil health. But first, to get us all excited, I always like to start off with fun soil health factoids. So 1 teaspoon of healthy soil contains 100 million to 1 billion individual bacteria. So that's just, to me, it's like mind blown, right? That's a lot going on in a little tiny bit of soil. And so we're going to talk about how you can keep that soil healthy and you can feed those microbes. And then that's going to encourage them to do amazing things. It's going to help with your nutrients, with your water holding capacity, and all kinds of really great things. So a little bit of a map of kind of where we're going. So we're going to talk first. We can't talk about soil health until we kind of establish the soil basics. And I know you kind of already talked and got into this for those of you who attended the last session with Payton, but I think you can never hear enough about the basics and kind of getting things going. So we're going to go over what is soil, why is it important? And then why do different soils form? And then how do those different soils that form maybe affect your use and management of the soil that you have on your farm or land? So first of all, what is soil? Why do we care? Soils are made up of minerals, organic matter. And when I say organic matter, that means decomposing plant and animal materials. So if you think of compost, mulch, manure, all of those are different types of organic matter. Air and water. So you can see in this diagram of this circle, we have on the right side of the circle, we have what are called soil solids. So in an ideal soil, you're going to have about 45% mineral matter and about 5% putting your roots down into the soil. You want to make sure that you have air, because you don't want your soil to be what we call anaerobic, where there's no oxygen. That's not going to be a healthy environment. And then also water, because water not just provides, that water that plants need, but it also helps to transport nutrients. And so imagine now you have this pore space and it's trampled, whether it be by animals such as cows or pigs, or by heavy farm equipment. And so what happens then is this pore space collapses, and that causes what we call compaction. And so that can have some pretty devastating effects on your soil, and also then limiting what roots can go into your soil, as well as your water and air. So back to that organic matter, I think you've probably heard this term or talked about it before, but you're going to hear it a lot throughout my entire presentation because it's so important in order to build healthy soils. So soil organic matter helps to promote strong soil structure. So that's kind of how your soil sticks together. When there's, good organic matter, it's going to help hold your soil together in place. It's going to help increase infiltration, which is when water goes into the soil. And if your water and rainwater, irrigation water is going into your soil, then that means there's less chance that it's going to run off of the land and end up in our oceans or in our water bodies. Back to those little microbes that we talked about in that teaspoon of soil. Soil organic matter provides essential carbon material. It can also help to filter pollutants and then build resistance to variations in climate. So I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but just wanted to mention, so with organic matter, it's important to understand that not all organic matter is created equal. So if you think about mulch, compost, all of those things, they all have different values and maybe what you want to do. It just depends on what your objective is with adding organic matter into your system. So here you can see 24:1 is an ideal microbial diet. So then if you have mac nut husks, those are about 40:1. So those are going to stick around longer, right? They're going to decompose slower. If you see this little turtle up here versus the rabbit down here. Versus like if you have manure, if you have like fresh grass clippings, those are going to be much faster decomposition rate, but that's going to get that, material into your soil faster. It just depends on kind of your objective with your organic matter. It's important to note that soil is a living resource. It supports life, right? It supports us, it supports animals, it supports plants, not just the plants and crops that we eat, but the plants that provide the oxygen that we breathe, that we owe our entire existence to, right? All of that coming from the soil. Also feeding livestock, as well as storing and filtering water. But it's so important to note that soil or whatever happens, but once that soil washes away, not only does it go into our oceans, but it's not like you wake up the next day and it's just, oh, okay, my soil's back again. It can take a really long time. In fact, it can take up to 1,000 years to produce just 2 or 3 centimeters of soil. So that's why we want to keep as much soil as we can in place on the landscape. And this little graphic here, it's like super simple, but yet other than the pine tree, I wish it was a palm tree, right? But the message is clear that here we have rain coming down from the clouds, and we want that rain to go into our soil to recharge our aquifer to recharge our soil, to replenish our plants. And what we don't want is to have that soil wash away with water going into our coral reefs and polluting our waterways. And by protecting those things, we're going to really protect our future as far as food security and climate resilience. So something that I think a lot of people don't think about, is how much is our soil worth? It's just kind of been taken for granted for, well, I'm just going to plant this crop and I'm just going to get whatever I need out of the soil as long as it's going to continue to give that to me. And so really, it's time to kind of change the way we think about soil. And it's really amazing. I already see this happening. I've been, talking about soils for about 20 years and soil health for about the last 10 years. And there's more and more interest in the fact that you all showed up at, 6 o'clock on a Wednesday evening to learn about soil, gives me hope that there's people out there that want to see this change and changing the way we think about soil, from moving from just a transactional, okay, this soil is here and it's here to serve me, to more thinking about the soil as a whole ecosystem and how it functions and how we need to give back to that soil so that it can continue to give back to us. So we're going to get into all of that later when we talk about soil health. But again, I want to kind of, continue with the foundational knowledge of soil and talk a little bit about soil formation. So different soils form all over the place, right? Most people kind of, know that, even if you within a small distance of, you may know on your 5-acre farm, oh, well, the soil over, in the north corner, that's a little bit wetter, maybe a little bit more clay. And then, oh, the soil down here in the south is a little bit shallower. There could be just even within, a small area, differences in soil. But different combinations of what we call soil forming factors combine to create all different kinds of soils. So what you're seeing here on this map is a soil survey of Hawaii. And we have these surveys for all of the islands that I mentioned across the Pacific. And so this is a huge resource, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a couple future slides. But just look at all the colors on here. All of those colors are representing different soil types on the landscape. And so how did that happen? How did we get so much variation in a relatively small distance? So the main soil forming factors that as soil scientists we recognize are climate. So that's going to be rainfall, temperature, sun, clouds, all of those kinds of things. Organisms, so that can be plants as well as animals, as well as microbes, and you see the little earthworm there. So the things we can see as well as the things we can't see. Parent material, so this is specific for Hawaii. So our parent material is a volcano, right? And that's kind of what formed these islands, and then they continue to sit over time and form very different landscapes, and that's the topography. Topography is the lay of the land. If you think of, areas that are steep, areas that are more alluvial and flat, or a bay, mountains, hills, all of those different things are different types of topography. So here in Hawaii, climate and time are the two main factors. And so and that, we can, if there's people from other islands across the Pacific, we can talk about those as well. But typically we have a northeasterly trade wind pattern. And so we have what we call our windward or wetter side of the island, and then our leeward or drier side on the west side. And that effect is more pronounced in Hawaii Island, where we have these two big volcanoes, Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa, in the middle. So it's harder for that moisture to get up and over those mountains. So as a result, we have anywhere from 150 to 300 inches of rain a year on the windward side, compared to about 10 to 30 inches per year on the leeward side. So that can make a huge difference in your microbial activity, in soil development, weathering, all of those different kinds of things. And as you go up the island chain, the mountains get smaller, but there is still a little bit of a, effect of windward, leeward. And then age or time is also very important. So we have Hawaii Island is the youngest island, moving all the way up to Kauai and Niihau, which are the oldest islands. And that makes very, very different for different soils. So here on the left, we have what I like to call the little baby soils. This is an organic soil on a very young lava flow in Puna on the island of Hawaii. And so this knife right here is stuck in the lava. So very, very teeny tiny soil, but it's important, don't underestimate that soil. That soil is similar to soils that are formed in Kona. Those soils support tons of agriculture. Our, world famous coffee is grown in these soils. We have papayas, macadamia nuts. So they can be very productive, mostly because of that organic matter that's in those soils. And we'll talk more about that. And then that's contrasted to the soil on the right, which depending on, where you're from, may look more familiar. That's a deep red soil. I call these the grandma soils. They've been around for a really long time. A lot of things have weathered out of them. And so they've kind of taken a beating. And that's just important to understand because that's going to change what the nutrient needs may be of the soil. All right, so now how do you learn more about the soil on your farm, on your land that you have, or perhaps land you don't have yet? What if you want to, you're a new farmer and you're looking for land? It's important to understand what soil you have before perhaps you enter into a lease or purchase a farm. And so I'm not into Instagram and all the different social media stuff, but I like making up hashtags. And so my hashtag for soil health is building better soil. And so by understanding your soil, you can manage your farm more effectively and efficiently. And so what does that mean? How do you understand your soil? So you need to understand what your soil's potential is. You're not going to take, that grandma soil that we just saw and add compost and organic matter and expect that it's going to change, especially in a short amount of time, to be similar to maybe what we, a prairie soil in the Midwest of the mainland, right? That's just not quite feasible. But that doesn't mean that your soil can't be productive and to meet its highest potential. So we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between a soil survey, which if you think back, that's that kind of all those different colors that I showed you in the map of Hawaii, and that versus soil analysis, or, taking soil samples for sending to a laboratory. And then we're going to combine that with understanding some of the field soil properties that you can just observe with your bare hands, with a shovel. And then really, really important is understanding past and present land use. It's really important to take note of that. And it doesn't have to be good or bad. It doesn't have to be, this land was trashed because these things happen. It's just acknowledging what came before, and then that's going to help you better build your soil back so that it can be healthy. And so then by doing that, you're going to have better, more successful farm management and success with whatever crop or, whatever you are trying to achieve with your soil. So how do you know if your soil is healthy? First of all, you got to get in, take that shovel, dig in, get dirty, touch your soil, feel it. Is it really sandy? Is it clay? Is it hard and like big chunks? Or is it, really soft and easy to, to dig and to work with? What is the color? Is it dark brown? Is it red? What do you think that might mean? And then, you can start to look for, so organic matter, you're going to tend to have darker colors. Structure, which we talked about in the pore space. So how does the soil kind of hold together? Do you see anything living in your soil? Are there little critters, that are, do you see little things, crawling around? Is it dry? Is it moist? These are all things that are really easy to kind of observe just with looking at the soil. So the difference between a soil survey and then a soil analysis. So I'm not sure how much you guys talked about this with Payton's presentation, but a soil survey is great tool for general information. But it's not site specific. We kind of make these broad generalizations of where all these different soils occur, and we're going to give you kind of a range of characteristics of this is what you can expect of this soil. But when you're actually, you have your land, you're ready to plant your cash crop, you're ready to do something specific with your soil, that's when you want to submit samples for laboratory analysis. And there's different kinds of laboratory analysis. You can do just like the basic, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, pH, organic matter. And then now there's actually, different tests that you can do for soil health to determine how healthy your soil is. So those are going to help you kind of get into the site-specific needs that you have. So really quick, we have a couple different tools for finding that soil survey data that I talked about. We have what's called the web soil survey. So if you just put that into your browser, and there's all kinds of information here on the home page. If this gets overwhelming, you can always contact me. Darlin's going to give my information at the end, and I can kind of help you through that. There's also another tool called the soil web. It's all the same information, all the same soil survey data. It's just a little bit more user-friendly format. And so there's a web browser called Soil Web. And then if you're a Google Earth user, there's a plugin for that. So you can kind of load up different layers and see what kind of soil types you might have. And then my favorite is our soil app. So that's the easiest thing, right? You just need to download. It's called Soil Web, all one word. And it says University of California, Davis. That is our partner that developed it because, we work for the government and, sometimes we need a little help to get into these techie things. And so right on the left, you see that's what it looks like inside of the app. And so you just have to have your GPS enabled and you hit get my location, and wherever you are in the Pacific Islands area, it's going to show you what soil type you have. And then you can click on these links and it's going to probably give you way more information you ever thought was possible to learn about soil. So I'm sure you have questions and hopefully you're putting those in the chat. We are going to do all the questions at the end and hopefully have some good discussion. Just wanted to mention that. So now we're going to kind of take a little bit of a turn. So we've kind of built that foundation of what is soil, why do we care about it, how do different soils form, how do I learn more about how, site-specific soil. And so now we're going to get into soil health basics. So what is soil health? I mean, I've mentioned this, you've heard it many times, throughout my presentation just today. Maybe you've heard it elsewhere. There's a lot of talk about, different things right now. And so we're just going to kind of dive into that and then why it's important, how we can manage to have better soil health, and then what are the benefits of soil health practices. So we have an actual definition of soil health. So it is the continued capacity of a soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. So you can see we are part of the equation. And so it's managing this ecosystem of soil in a way that we can still exist, other animals and plants can also still exist, and then this soil ecosystem exists. And so the big take-home message message here is healthy soil is alive, right? We want to see, you can see this photo or this like infographic, there's earthworms, there's live roots in the soil, there's different leaf matter that's going to like get worked into the soil by those earthworms. So that's really what makes a soil healthy, is when it's alive. And so why do we care? Healthy soil is really, really important because it can benefit as a farmer. It can benefit your productivity by increasing your productivity. And then that can also increase your profitability, because if your soil's healthier, ideally that means that your inputs, so your synthetic fertilizer, perhaps your irrigation bill, those costs should go down because your soil is kind of sustaining itself again as that ecosystem. We talked a little bit about how we want soil to stay in place on the landscape. We want to prevent soil loss by keeping the soil covered. We want to provide habitat for beneficial soil life. And really the biggest thing is we want to ensure that soil is going to be productive for many years to come. We want to get away from just kind of using the soil for today and instead doing things today that are going to ensure that many generations from now, that soil is still productive, if not even more productive. And so we all benefit from having healthy soil. So farmers and ranchers, again, benefit from that increased profitability, productivity, yield, etc. Landowners and managers, so whether you're leasing the land or you own the land, by having that longevity and that productivity and that resilience built into your soil, that's going to be a benefit. Island communities benefit. So by taking care of our soils, we're going to have cleaner water, we're going to have cleaner air if we're decreasing the amount of erosion that's happening, whether it be wind or water. And then hopefully by taking care of our soils, that's going to improve the food that can be grown, our food security, right? And so we're going to benefit from that. And then obviously, we want things to be around again for future generations. All right, so we like covered all of that. That's great. Now what? How on earth do we manage to make soil healthier? So there's what we call soil health principles, which are just kind of guiding you in how you take care of your soil. And then there's practices that are going to help you to achieve those principles. So we have 4 different soil health principles to improve soil health. So the first one is to keep the soil covered at all times. And so that can include cover crops, mulch, residue, anything that you're kind of, instead of just leaving the soil bare, kind of tilling the weeds just to keep it clean. You want to have that soil covered as much as possible, as much of the time. Number 2 is maximizing diversity. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means. So that can be both crop rotation, or it could be just within, having diversity within the area that you plant on your farm, having different kinds of crops growing at the same time. Number 3 is to keep living roots in the soil. So active soil is healthy soil. And then the 4th one is to minimize soil disturbance. So every time that the soil is disturbed, whether by tillage or some other, disturbance that's kind of breaking that soil open and exposing it to the sun, that's going to disturb both the soil biology as well as the soil structure. So this is all of those in a nice fun graphic, but it kind of takes the principles and breaks them down into the why. Why do we care? Why do we want to follow these principles? So when we're minimizing disturbance and maximizing soil cover, so that's the right side of the circle here, you're going to protect your soil aggregates. So that's the soil structure. That's what you kind of have soil glue to kind of hold that soil together. So then it's more likely to stay in place. You're going to protect your organic matter, because if you have the soils uncovered, every time that soil is disturbed, you run the risk of losing organic matter to the atmosphere when the sun is out there pounding on the soil, and it's going to volatilize, and you're going to lose that organic matter. And then it's going to help protect your soil biology. We talked a little bit about habitat for soil microbes. And so by keeping the soil covered, minimizing disturbance, they're going to be healthy and happier. And then speaking of the microbes, on the left-hand side here, we have maximizing continuous living roots and maximizing biodiversity. So those are going to feed and fuel those little critters that you just have to take my word that they're there, but they're there and they're hungry. And so you want to make sure that you're providing them with the feed and fuel that they need. So this is just taking it, kind of a step further for each of the principles. So when you use residues, mulch, live plants, anything to keep the soil covered, your soil is going to be cooler. It's going to conserve moisture. You're going to suppress weeds, which is a good thing, right? Who likes to go out and pull weeds? And then again, you're going to feed that soil biology. And so think about it, right? When we go and we're all outside, whether it's at, a farm event or, you're going to the beach, I don't know about you, but at least me, I'm always like, okay, where's the closest tree? Is there any shade? Because it gets hot, right? And so when the soil's covered, it's cooler. It actually has a really major effect on your soil temperature. And that again affects your soil microbes. When they're cool, they're happy, and they're going to be doing all of the good things to make more nutrients available. All right, the second principle again is to maximize diversity. So this could be, when you have what we call temporal. So over time, you're going to rotate different crops through your cropping system, and you may incorporate what we call cover crops, which are kind of like a time to let your soil rest. And you're going to put a crop that's going to provide some kind of benefit to your soil while it kind of rests, and then you're going to follow that back up with another cash crop. And then the other option is to have what we call spatial diversity. So you would have lots of different things growing all at the same time. You may have pollinator habitat, or what we call insectary plants to kind of draw pests away, but just having as much diversity as you can growing in the soil. And so that brings me to number 3, which is to keep living roots in the soil. So we think about having mulch on the soil, compost, residues, grass clippings, and all of that is great. Don't get me wrong. You're keeping the soil covered, you're feeding those microbes, but it's kind of like the extra added icing on the cupcake with sprinkles and whipped cream when you have living roots in the soil. So when you have those living roots, they're actually putting out sugars or exudates that stimulate all of the soil biology. So think of it like a buffet for all those little microbes, and they're just coming and feeding. And because there's a diversity of different roots, that means they're all going to taste different and they're all going to be exuding different sugars. And so you have that active soil, which means it's a healthy soil, and it means it's once again alive, right? We want healthy soil to be alive. All right, and the fourth one is to minimize soil disturbance. Now notice this says minimize. It does not say avoid or no soil disturbance, because we are a part of the equation, right? And it's acknowledging that, there needs to perhaps be some level of disturbance in order to plant that cash crop. But it's just minimizing that. So not going out and disking a field just because there's weeds growing, you want it to be nice and clean and bare, right? It's getting away from that and only disturbing the soil when you have to for planting, your cash crops. And so what happens when we disturb the soil is it breaks down the soil structure. If you think about that pore space way back at the beginning, when you're getting in and ripping the soil up using any kind of implements, you risk compacting the soil, and that can decrease, rooting depth, how water can move through the soil. When a soil is exposed, you're going to increase your soil respiration rates. So all of a sudden the microbes are like, oh my gosh, it's super hot. We're just going to like expend all of our energy. And then before you know it, they're just kind of like passed out and dormant, or they've gone way down deeper in the soil profile. And so anything you can do to, again, then they all the different principles go together. If you kind of think about it as a holistic, again, building that soil ecosystem. So soil practices that are going to help us to achieve those principles. This is just a list of all of the different, kinds of different practices that we may, have at NRCS. But they're all things that we've already talked about, right? So conservation crop rotation, cover crops, residue and tillage management. So that's going to be minimizing your tillage or disturbance. Soil carbon amendment. So that's going to be putting those different mulches, compost, maybe even biochar into the soil. Having conservation cover. So the difference between conservation cover or cover crop would be, a cover crop would be part of a crop rotation, whereas conservation cover would be a permanent cover. Perennial peanut is one that's commonly used in orchard settings or in some area where, you're not going to continue to use that soil. You just want to keep it covered with live roots. Mulching is a, really important and well-used practice. And then I think you guys are going to have, I think there's a follow-up with agroforestry, which, as we know, is a really important cultural practice for all of the Pacific Islands. And so having a mixture of both natives and edibles, perhaps having a vegetative barrier, getting that tree shrub establishment, so getting your agroforest going, and then having different kinds of plantings and vegetation there. And so we've kind of talked about already, so we have those 4 soil health principles, and then there's different practices that we can use to, adhere and to meet those principles. And then putting all of those together, we're going to build what we call a soil health management system. And that sounds scary and big, but all it is just like getting back to that definition of soil health and trying to have that thriving, vital living ecosystem of soil. And so this just going to take some of those practices and put them in a different way. So when you have a soil health management system, you're trying to adhere to ideally all of the soil health principles, or as many as possible, or as many that make sense. And so this is just kind of a different checkbox of showing which different things, which principles are meeting with different practices. And so when you're kind of putting this, and building practices upon each other, that's how you kind of build this long-term system. It's going to build that resilience over time, that long-term productivity that we talked about. So what are the benefits? What's going to happen if we start to do these practices versus just doing nothing or continuing to do the same thing, perhaps that's been done for years? So when you cover the exposed soil and you maximize diversity and living roots, you're going to improve the efficiency of water and nutrient inputs. You're going to decrease runoff and erosion. You're going to have the benefits of cover crops and plant diversity. When you add mulch and compost, you're going to increase the organic matter in your soil. And that's going to provide food for those soil organisms, which then are doing all of the heavy lifting and all of the hard work to then improve your soil fertility. By feeding those organisms, they're going to break down that, that compost even further and make that into nutrients that are available for your plants to uptake. And so then that means that you shouldn't have to add as much synthetic fertilizer, because you're kind of providing this more natural and systemic system. It's part of the soil health management system. When you minimize soil disturbance, you're going to maintain that soil structure. The soil is going to hold together better. It's going to be better able to hold on to moisture. It's going to be more resistant to erosion. And again, it's going to protect those soil organisms in their little houses or habitats where they like to live. So really quick, these are just, again, all the principles: minimizing disturbance, maximizing soil cover, maximizing biodiversity, and maximizing continuous living roots. So I think we have just a few minutes left. And so I just want to kind of show some different examples that perhaps will kind of get you excited about soil health. And I think it's important to know, like, soil health is scalable. So I have different practices that I've used: cover crops, I use mulch, I'm doing conservation cover, all in my half-acre backyard garden. But then you can take these same concepts and build them into bigger and bigger systems. And that's kind of the beauty of it. And you get those benefits as you continue to do the practices, regardless of the size. So this is one of my favorite. This is actually from Saipan, but we all like coconuts, right? But then what are you going to do with those pesky husks? Turns out they can make pretty nice mulch. And so this is, if you think back to the carbon and nitrogen ratio, pretty high, but that means that these are going to be there for a while. So they're going to help with, weed suppression would be kind of the main thing that you're looking at here. And they're going to break down really slowly into that soil for you. Here's some different examples of just kind of a homemade compost. We all have bananas hanging around, in our yards and our farms and our gardens. And so here it's just using those bananas to make a kind of container of sorts to put those compost materials in as you're kind of cleaning things up around your farm or your yard. You can add those in, and then those will turn into compost. This is a little bit of a different example. This is from Guam, but in this case, the soils are very thin over limestone, but this farmer was utilizing a combination of compost and shredded paper, both which were freely available to him. Cost a lot of money. So that's kind of a different scenario of, finding resources out there that, may be available, and you're helping someone else get rid of their waste, but then you can put that to use in your soil health management system. This is a vegetative barrier in American Samoa using lemongrass. Vetiver is another common vegetative barrier that you can use. And so that is really useful on areas where there's a steeper slope. So if you're doing contour farming, you can kind of use the lemongrass or the vetiver to kind of form, a barrier, so that if soil does come down, it's going to come up against that barrier versus washing all the way down to the bottom of the hill and keep going. Compost tea, vermiculture, just a regular compost pile, all exciting things that you can try. Plant smarter. So this is a Madre de Cal or Gliricidia. So this is commonly used as a windbreak in many farms, so in between fields perhaps, but it is a nitrogen fixer. So it's something that grows pretty rapidly here in the tropics, subtropics. And so you can be used for what we call chop and drop. So as it's growing, you're like, oh my gosh, it's getting a little tall, I might want to cut it back. You can just chop it back to whatever height you want and mulch all the material that comes off straight into your soil. Pollinators are our friends, right? They are really crucial to the success of all of our crops. And so having any kind of flowers around that, or a pollinator, like a bee box, anything that you can do to incorporate that into your system. So with that, I know we're going to have questions, but I did also just want to show our website really quick, and I'll put this into the chat. But there's a lot of information here about our programs. We provide financial assistance as well as technical assistance to all types of farmers, ranchers, foresters, landowners, land managers who are interested. And so I encourage you to go to the website to find out more about which programs might be right for you. And more importantly, if you scroll down here, you will see find your local service center. And so it is listed. So we have Hawaii, Federated States of Micronesia, American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands. And so I'll pick Hawaii just to show you how it works. And so then we'll pick Honolulu. And then this will provide you with our information of how to get a hold of people in our office. And also there's a wonderful, I know a lot of you are beginning farmers and ranchers. There's a lot of information here on this farmers.gov, which is a broader USDA website. And so back to, NRCS and what we do. So we do have what we call farm bill programs that are available for financial assistance. And so those are, if you contact your local service center, kind of the way the process goes is you will have someone come out to your property. They'll really go through and kind of listen to your objectives, listens to your concerns, take you through your property, and then kind of give you some different options and help you understand what our programs may be able to offer you. So with that, Darlin, I'm going to turn it back to you, I think, for questions, if you're going to moderate that.
Mahalo so much, Amy. That was amazing, in depth, and you shared so much information with us. So
I know it's probably a little overwhelming because I do get excited and I talk kind of fast, but hopefully people got it, or they'll be able to access the recording and kind of go back and watch it in slow motion.
and the recordings will be available to everybody. If you haven't been on our previous calls, there we will go ahead and share it again. We do have a shared folder on Google that has like previous information on previous workshops, and then as well as all of the recordings will be continued to be uploaded up to there as well. Just a heads up so that you know, if you do go ahead and request access to it, it'll just take a moment, but we will go ahead and make sure that you get access to those documents as well. So we are very grateful to you, Amy, for sharing all of that information. This was amazing. You can see on your screen now that if you do want to speak with Amy directly, pick her brain a little bit more outside of our Q&A, we're going to be doing a poll right now as well. So this poll is just so that we can get some and gather some more information on who's attending our workshops, as well as make sure that we get all of this information and these videos to you folks outside of this, and then as well all of our upcoming workshops that are going to be going through the rest of the summer. So I'm going to be putting that poll up there. If you can fill it out, we greatly appreciate it. It gives us a little bit more information as to, where we're going, who we're helping, and who we can continue to help. So I'm going to open it up to our questions now. And I do believe I've got a couple questions in here already. The first one was, what are the benefits of Waianaku grass?
With a little smiley face. I saw that one. That one's, yeah. I would say Waianaku grass is obviously going to do a very good job of keeping your soil covered. It just depends on where it is and whether that's what you want to be there. There are different ways. So if, you perhaps don't want Waianaku grass in an area that perhaps you want to plant into a crop, and you can do kind of a solarization where you're like kind of killing it in place versus, killing it, if you don't want to use herbicide, but kind of keeping that there. So then it's kind of decomposing back into your soil versus like, pulling it out altogether. Anything you can do to kind of keep that organic matter, even if you don't, it's not alive anymore, getting that back into the soil is going to help. But yeah, Waianaku grass is a pretty tenacious bugger, I think you could say.
All right. Well, mahalo, Amy. One of the questions that I'm curious about is
Sure.
what types of native plants can we integrate into our systems so that we can reintroduce indigenous microorganisms?
Yes, that is a great question. And there are a lot of, it kind of depends on what you want to do. We talked a little bit at the end about agroforestry, and I think you all have a whole segment coming up on that. So that's going to be, perhaps some of your bigger natives, or canoe plants as well. But there's a lot of ground covers, and I have to admit I'm a soil person, but I can find the names, or if you contact me, I can give you some resources that we have. But there are some pretty amazing natives that can be used just for ground cover. So they do a pretty good job, and they're pretty resilient. They can make it through times of drought. I'm trying to think. Hina, I think is one of them. But yeah, I definitely, if you can email me if you want to know more about that, I can find those exact ones. But there's definitely lots of different options. And then it just depends on, what your objectives are for, low growing, tall growing, something that's fruiting, something that's flowering, all those different things. But definitely, where you can, it's good to plant native.
Awesome. Mahalo, Amy. Do we have any other questions from our audience? Feel free to speak up now. You can unmute yourself and just ask Amy directly, or put them in the chat if you'd rather. But this is your opportunity.
No questions?
Kind of surprised.
Man, maybe I did talk too fast.
That was a lot. Maybe everybody's still digesting information. I have one. Like, where can we find Madre de Cacao?
Oh, that is a good question. I know that, a lot of times it's just kind of like finding somebody who has a tree, because it propagates by cutting. But most places, I would think most nurseries would have it. I'm not sure. There's different seed companies, and I'm not sure if that's one that propagates by seed. So again, if you contact me, I can definitely put you in contact with the plant people that know exactly where to find those things. But once you get it established, it is, it'll be pretty hardy, and you can, share it. Same with perennial peanut. It's one that reproduces by stolon. So once you kind of have it established, you can kind of keep cutting it and putting it in new areas, and it'll just kind of keep spreading out. And that one's not native, but it'll still, have a great utility. It has the nitrogen fixing, same as the Madre de Cacao. And it's got cute little yellow flowers. So that's why I like it.
I have one.
Sure.
Yeah, I was wondering about eucalyptus and if it has any benefits to soil health.
So sure. So eucalyptus is a common, it's used often for windbreaks. There's a lot of old plantings from, old sugarcane and pineapple plantations where they have. And so, it's a live root in the soil, right? And so that's going to help to, break up any compaction, and then have those benefits of having a live root, having that carbon. And then, anytime you have a tree, that's going to constantly be shedding material back onto the soil, right? And if you're leaving that on top of the soil, it's going to eventually break down and be incorporated and increase your organic matter. Eucalyptus specifically, I know some, people have, think that, kind of avoid it because they feel like it has, allelopathic properties. But from my understanding, it's just very efficient in shading things out and also using water. So just keep that in mind, though, when you are planting it, that it, is going to, be take on that resource of, utilizing a lot of the water in your area. So you might want to plant it too close to, where you would have the crop.
Awesome, mahalo. So it looks
Thank
like
you, mahalo.
that's a great question. We also have some questions in the chat. The
Okay.
first one is, how would you manage soil health differently between newer organic soils and older mineral soils?
That is a great question. So the organic soils that are very common on Hawaii Island, especially, they're very fragile. They're very susceptible because they have such a tiny amount of soil to begin with. And it's all organic. So a lot of that is just, it's the same principles and practices, really, but it's just kind of, you're going to have to tweak everything and modify it just a little bit. But, the difference, so a lot of times in those areas, mulching tends to be the number one like practice, right? So you have, say, a coffee orchard or an avocado orchard, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to keep putting mulch. And that's good, right? Because you're doing something and you're replenishing that organic matter, but you're still going to lose, you're going to constantly be in that cycle of adding the mulch, because the mulch is just going to constantly break down. Some of it's going to volatilize. Whereas if you can, get that mulch to help you, and perhaps mixing it with compost to kind of build that soil later back up. And then if you can take that one step further to establish a conservation cover, that's the difference between a soil health practice and a soil health management system, if that makes sense. And then as far as mineral soils, you're going to have, it's going to be easier to, perhaps establish, and maybe you want to use more cover crops, especially if you're doing, more cropping systems versus an orchard system. That's one of the biggest differences I see between those two soil types. And so you have a lot more options if you get into the different kinds of cover crops. There's a picture in one of my slides of a daikon radish that's commonly used for areas that may have compaction, based on farmer use and management, and all kinds of different possibilities when it comes to cover crops. So that would be, I guess, like one different thing, but it's the principles and the practices are still the same. It's just kind of picking and choosing based on really more about what your objectives are and what you want to grow.
Awesome. Well, mahalo for that. I think a lot of our minds were blown from your question, for your answer. Questions. It's a lot of things happening right now. I do have more questions for you though. So we have,
Okay.
do you have any specific information on soil structure for Waimanalo?
If you go to Soil Web, which is the app, or Web Soil Survey, any of those that information that I provided, that's going to give you the soil survey, and that's going to have an in-depth description of the types of soil that you're going to find in your area. And it's going to give you an idea of the soil structure. But anytime, like, you want site-specific, improving soil structure, that has to do with, continuing to add your organic matter back into the soil. That's going to help to build that structure. And so, like, I didn't, like, again, it's so hard to like fit everything into an hour. Like, soil structure could be like, a whole 10 minutes of all the different kinds of structure, but like, you don't want it to be like beach sand, where it's what we call single grain. You don't want it to be a brick. You want to be like the ideal, and then I compare it to is like grape nut cereal. Like, you want to have like little like chunks, or, that are kind of holding together. And you can see when you have like good structure. Like, I guess I'm, biased because I'm a soil scientist.
If only we could all look at the soil and know exactly what the good structure looks like. Hello, everyone. The wind was blowing, so my internet is struggling.
Oh
no. Okay. So I'm not sure where I got cut off on. but I will go back to our chat and just continue on our questions. I do have one more.
Sure.
How do we manage single crop history of certain lands? Are they overly depleted?
It depends, would be my answer to that. If you think back, so I've dug soil pits in many different areas, but here the most common single crop historically that we've had are sugarcane and pineapple. And so both were managed quite differently in how they were established, what kind of pH they needed, all of those kinds of things. But as far as, how to kind of overcome that, it really goes back to those same principles and practices. And that's where it's important to look at your soil survey, because I've seen, soils that are here on the Hamakua coast that have had, the same impact of, a long time of being in a monocrop, but then they've, perhaps rested in pasture for the last 20 years, or maybe they're continuously used. But by the nature of the soils, they're younger volcanic soils, they tend to be very forgiving. And so they have a high amount of organic matter naturally. And so sometimes that's kind of helping, like, kind of buffer the soil in a way. But you can always still make it better, right? By adding more of that organic matter. Compaction tends to be one of the really big, problems that we have. And so there's different, there's a deep tillage practice, which, yes, we say, okay, we don't want to, disturb the soil, we want to minimize, but that would ideally be something that you would just do once. And then as you're kind of overcoming and putting in cover crops, doing crop rotation, adding organic matter back into the soil, you're going to help remediate that soil. Compare that, there's also, a lot of soils on Oahu that have a lot of organic matter that, again, is just natural. So that's kind of helped them. Versus if you think of those grandma soils I talked about, which it's not a bad thing. I love the grandma red soils. They're pretty exciting and really cool to dig and play in. But they may need a little extra love, right? They may need, a higher amount of organic matter. You may see more compaction and it may take a little longer, or you may not see that difference, right? A lot of times we look for like color change. It's like, oh, if the soil is dark brown, then that means it has lots of organic matter. But when you're starting off with a super red soil, it's going to take longer to see that, but that doesn't mean things aren't happening. So it depends on kind of a lot of different factors of what soil type you started with, how intense the past use and management was, but it still generally comes back to a same suite of practices. It's just kind of picking and choosing based on your objectives and your site, your specific site issues, concerns, resource concerns that you have.
I know there's a lot of information that you're having to share that compacts probably decades worth of education. So I appreciate you trying to share that.
Yeah. And all that, I hope in this presentation is that it just helps you all to just think differently about soil, whether that's getting the Soil Web app. And, I'm a total soil geek. When I go places, I've got that on my phone. I'm like, ooh, I wonder what the soil is here, and kind of get into it. And so just starting to do that, or just, just thinking about soil differently, thinking about trying to picture, like, what is a teaspoon of soil with, 100 million to 1 billion microbes? If you looked under a microscope, what does that look like? Just having those kinds of thoughts really tends to help people think differently and then want to make the changes to, and little by little, you all then talk to other people, and then it just kind of spreads. And before you know it, that's just what we do, right? You just take care of your soil, and it's just a non-issue. So that's all I hope. And we have lots, if you go to our website, there's a soil health link. You'll find lots of different, materials there, like brochures, different information, and it's actually available in many different languages. So if you know other people that maybe English isn't their first language, we have all kinds of different resources there. So I encourage you to kind of check that out now that you've kind of like, just gotten your feet wet with soil health. Like there's so much more information out there. So
I am curious too, because you have shared that you folks have a lot of resources that you provide to our farmers.
yes.
How also does that affect our legislation as well? Because we obviously are understanding now that it's a priority to put our soil health above, obviously we realized this decades ago with the
Yes.
Dust Bowl, but I am curious of current legislation that may be encouraging positive soil health practices and maybe even incentivizing farmers to practice in healthy soil management.
Yes, that is an excellent question, darling. So normally, so most of our funding, and I can speak to, we don't affect per se like state legislation, but there is interest at the state level. But from a federal perspective, we have, Farm Bill, which kind of is just traditional, and it does, you can get funding through different programs for some of the practices like cover crop and crop rotation, grazing, agroforestry. But right now we got a huge amount of extra funding that was through the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. And that we have a lot of funding coming our way, as long as everything, stays on track of how we've been kind of told that it will and what was laid out in this, legislation. But the focus for that is climate smart agriculture. And so that's all the things we talked about and more. So it's not just agriculture, it's climate smart agriculture and forestry. You can find more about that on the website or contact me. I am, the contact for those programs for Pacific Islands area and getting those practices out there. And we're working actively to expand what practices, are considered climate smart practices, but there's a whole list. And so there's even more, funding available for that. And then we have all kinds of different, there's tons of partners. So this is a USDA, I believe this was a broader USDA grant, but there are there's been the climate commodities grant, lots of different ways that our funding is getting out and doing good things through the community. So Hawaii was awarded climate smart commodities, a pretty big agreement. And so there's going to be a lot going on with that. So look for more of these kinds of events, right? Where there's more outreach, more scientific, like trying to measure, okay, so we talk about these practices, but what are they really doing for soil health, for organic matter, and starting to track and quantify all of that as well. So great question, but it's definitely exciting to have such a change all of a sudden. Is a little daunting because we're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do all this? But we need farmers who are interested and excited about doing climate smart agriculture to come work with us. So you can contact me. I can get you in contact with the right person for your specific area. Or like I showed you on the website, you can go find your contact for your service area.
Thank you so much. We are excited to see all of the changes that are happening. I know it's happening really rapidly, but I think everyone's kind of recognizing that rapid change is extremely important, starting with our soils. So we're really grateful for you joining us tonight and sharing all of this information with us. I just want to open up if anyone else has any more questions for this evening. We will be starting to wrap everything up. I believe everyone who can take the poll that is still open, but I just want to open it up one last time before we mahalo everyone for joining us. Okay, well,
all right.
Going with that, we will be having our agroforestry workshop coming up on June 28th with Dave Sansone. And it does kind of lead into what we were talking about today with our soil management and soil health. It all is interconnected. So I hope you folks can all join us. Feel free to check out our website at hfuu.org. And we will always have all of the upcoming workshop information up on there. If you have shared your information on the poll, we will also make sure that that information gets sent straight to you. You can also check out our newsletter. All of that information is updated in there. We are so grateful for everyone joining us tonight. I hope you were able to take a lot of mana'o and ike out of this session. There's a lot of information shared, so I know some people may want to go back and take some notes later on, maybe pictures of some slides possibly. So we'll be sharing all of that information in the Google folder. Make sure you just request that access and it will be granted. And then keep us updated. You know, we're excited to see where everybody's going with this. So keep joining in on us, share the polls as you kind of grow and learn with us all. And mahalo again, Amy, for sharing all of that
Yay.
information with us.
Mahalo for having me. Thank you everyone for taking time to join. Have a wonderful evening.
All right, everyone. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. That is going to be all for our workshop this evening. See you guys on June 28th, we hope.
Sounds good.
Mahalo.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Mahalo, aloha, mahalo.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was a really great presentation.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't want to hang up yet in case you, yeah, so we could just kind of follow up.
Yeah, mahalo. I'm just saving everything right now as everyone's
Sure.
kind of leaving. And then I will also go ahead and share the results with you folks after this. I accidentally
Okay.
shared it with everyone. Sorry. Hold
Hello.
on.
Excuse me.
Oh.
Hi, can I interrupt? Sorry.
Sure.
I was trying to fill out the poll. My name is Mike, by the way. Calling in from IAEA. And I was filling out the poll, but I got shut down.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to fill it out. Could you send it to my email address if I
I
give it
can
to you?
relaunch it for you right now. It should be back open.
Okay, great.
Is that
Thank
you, Gilbo?
Yes. Yeah,
I
Michael Gill.
recognize your voice. Hi.
Hey, hi, Rita. Hi. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
So-
you for the presentation.
Mahalo for joining us. We appreciate it. So I'll go ahead and leave the poll open a little bit longer then. And
Great,
so
thank you.
anyone else still on the call, including you, Michael, appreciate you sharing that. I will go ahead and leave this open for a few more minutes then. Feel free to share that information.
Great.
We've got
Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you. Thank you. It
You're
was really good.
So, okay, good. Because I never know when people are like, no questions. I'm like, did they fall asleep? Or they're just like, whoa, mind blown emoji. That was so cool. I don't even know where to start asking questions.
No, very thorough. I mean, I like the way the slides are laid out. It's easy to super easy to understand. So
Good.
yay, thank you.
That's good feedback. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Yes, thank you so much. And thanks, Payton. Thanks, Darlin.
yes, mahalo everybody for helping make this happen. You know, it's a team effort. So I'm super grateful. And I, for one, can understand the whole non-question part. I feel like sometimes it takes somebody asking a question to like, oh, you know what, I was thinking about this. Maybe I should ask about that. It's like it kind of gets the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And thanks for
And
coming,
we will,
Chantel. You always add
Yeah.
value.
we will pass this on now that I'm aware of this and that it's going to be an ongoing event. We will be sure to share it through our networks, especially the agroforestry one, because we have a lot of interest and a lot of people practicing agroforestry, and that aligns really well with what we have going on. So both for our employees and for our producers. So we'll be sure to send that out.
Yeah, thanks for that, especially since you have offices out in the Pacific Islands, because we've been trying to
Yes.
reach out to them because we have some contacts, but I'm sure you
Okay.
need way more people in the ag sector.
Okay. Yeah, we can do
Yes.
that. Yeah.
And the next time
Amy.
you're rolling through to visit the Kona office, please do come visit down at Community Garden.
Oh, okay. At the Kona Community Garden.
No, it's
No.
at Moana. We're an NRCS partner and a People's
Okay.
Gardens. Yeah. So
Okay.
next time you come to the
Sweet.
Kona office,
Okay.
have Robin drag
will.
you on down to,
Okay.
or Mary drag you on down.
Oh, I think I've heard good things about you're the one you get all the cardboard and all the paper. Yes?
Oh yeah, I get
Mhm.
you guys' cardboard too. Sometimes it comes over from Hilo.
Okay, nice. Good, good, good. Yes, I think I've heard about you, Chantal.
Oh,
I'm
she's
not
famous.
nearly as crazy as people say.
It's all good stuff. I was like, I gotta meet her. She likes soil and she's doing good things with the soil.
Well,
Yeah, you
she's
gotta
on,
come meet all the worms, the thousands and thousands of worms.
Okay, will do.
well, Chantal, you're up after Dave Sanson, right? For the alternate Wednesdays after that?
Yeah, I think I am the 26th of July and August 9th, I believe.
26.
I put it in my calendar
that.
already, huh?
Yeah.
Good
yeah,
fun. We're
yeah.
gonna talk wormy,
Okay.
wormy joy.
Yeah, no, Chantal, let's do something because we have I have a soil scientist based in Kona and there's an intern this summer. So let's set something up this summer to get out.
Yeah,
and see
have
you.
Robin. Robin's one of our board members too.
Okay,
And then your office helped us become a People's Garden,
nice.
a USDA People's Garden now. So yeah, let's do something this
Okay.
summer. I've got high
Okay,
school students coming from the US mainland and then some gap year
Wow.
students coming later on. So come
okay.
hang, come hang.
Yay,
Mhm.
sounds good. All right.
Thank
Anything else?
you much.
I'm gonna
Really
go get some
appreciate it,
dinner.
Amy. Thanks, darling.
I have one question for Amy.
Oh,
So
sure.
this is Mike again.
Yeah.
Hi, is the Climate Smart program that you mentioned are former trust territories eligible?
Territories are eligible for the associated states are not. So Guam, CNMI, American Samoa are all eligible in addition to Hawaii.
Okay, thank you.
Good to know. Thanks. Good question.
Mhm.
Okay, well, it looks like we got our last poll filled out. Michael, do you need a little bit more time to finish up?
I think I submitted.
Okay,
Thank you.
awesome. Perfect. I didn't want to cut you off again.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes.
right.
Maria, maybe I'll give you a call tomorrow if you're
Yeah,
around.
please do. Anytime.
Okay, I
Well,
got
not
some news for
tomorrow.
you.
Tomorrow's super bad. Friday would be better.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Aloha, everyone. And I'll look forward to joining perhaps the future as a participant. So
Even
Thank you
better.
learning more.
Much.
Yeah.
Good night, guys.
Love it. Okay, great work. I'm excited to see kind of we hear about all these different programs and it's great to see them in action, and it makes it easier for us from USDA. It's like you all did all the hard work, right? You organize and you're like, hey, Amy, can you show up and give a talk? And like that we can do. And so we appreciate you, and it helps to, help everybody, right? So love
Yeah,
it.
thanks. Well, thank you for joining us at night. We know it's late, but thank you
No,
so much.
I do. Yeah, I do it for Go Farm all the time. And I at least, I don't stay at my office. I come home and yeah. So, but all right, I am going to sign off unless there's anything else that you all need.
No, we appreciate you being here.
Okay.
Hello.
All
It's
right.
perfect
Aloha.
timing at 7:30. Have a great night, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Night, guys.
Bye.
Bye.